Shadow Gang, welcome back to another video. Okay, let me stop. Alright, you know what the drill is. I'm trying to get to 1,000 subscribers. Please hit the subscribe button if you're new here. And shit, watch my previous video. And yo, follow me on my socials and shit. So let's get right into it. Best luchas. Which I don't know what the fuck that means. Well, I know what that means, but it should say luchadors. But WWE's greatest Libre stars. Okay, wrestling with Andy. I think you're trying a little too hard, homie. No, real shit though. I was supposed to do my own version of this shit, but I'm like, you know what? Might as well just react to it. And I've been busy this fucking week. So yeah, reaction it is. Put this brightness up and let's get right into this shit. Let's see if I agree or disagree.
Libre has always been one of the most exciting wrestling styles out there, what with its incredibly visual appealing mixture of high-flying theatrics and superhero-esque costumes. But just who are the greatest lucha wrestlers to ever grace a WWE ring? Well, that's exactly what we're going to be looking at right now, starting with Rey Mysterio.
Yes, sir.
Yes, if you were to make that Mount Rushmore of all-time great luchadors, then Rey Mysterio would no doubt sit on it proudly.
Yes,
and the reason
top.
he takes this spot amongst the greats is because he's just that awesome. Of course, Rey was great long before he went to WWE,
Yes,
though.
sir.
Hell, as far back as his early days in companies such as AAA and ECW, he was proving to be a performer of rare talent.
Yes.
Then, when he went to WCW in 1996 and became a key part of their cruiserweight division, he reached another level again, largely because this was the first time a more worldwide audience had been able to see him do his thing. But for as great as Rey was in WCW, he wasn't good enough to stop that company from going under in 2001. And so it was that not long after this happened, he'd find himself working for WWE instead. How would he fare there? Well, despite having everything going against him in terms of size, the Californian would manage to succeed to the point of becoming a multiple-time world champion.
Yes, sir.
Sure, his runs with the gold wouldn't exactly be all-timers, but the fact Rey was able to get to that point at all, despite being a small guy in the land of giants, is a testament to just how high...
Listen, man. Rey's iconic. Don't believe me? I'm wearing a mask because of him. What? And also, like, I had an option to have a Halloween costume, and it was either Rey Mysterio or John Cena. I love John Cena. He's my favorite, but I had to pick Rey. I was short and skinny like him, so he really inspired me to really, like, you know, reach for the skies and shit like that, just like Cena did. So, and plus, I'm wearing a mask like him. Lucha Libre all day.
High a level of skill he was operating with, and how much audiences were behind him. Really, you could make a very solid argument that of all the luchadors to ever set foot in a ring, Mysterio is the greatest.
Of course.
Yes, there's a reason WWE have been searching for a newer, younger version of him for decades now, but he's far from the only great lucha star who's ever worked for WWE.
He's just the greatest, though.
No, there have been plenty of others over the years too, with one of the most prominent being Sin Cara.
Which one?
Now, this is a tricky one to talk about, as there were technically two Sin Caras who worked for WWE, one played by Luis Alverde and one played by Jose Rodriguez.
Yes, Rodriguez the one.
Why were there two versions of this gimmick? Well, it's a little complicated. It started back in 2011 when Alverde, the man alternatively known as Mystico, one of the greatest wrestlers alive even to this day, signed on the dotted line with Vince McMahon. Obviously then, McMahon's hope here was that a talent on the level of Mystico would become his new Rey Mysterio. But unfortunately, things didn't exactly work out this way, as Mystico's style just didn't mesh with the WWE. And that led to him being something of a flop after a while. So this is why a second version of Sin Cara would be brought in later on in 2011, this time played by Jose Rodriguez. Surely that would work out better, right? Well, not exactly, because Rodriguez would turn out to have many of the same issues Alverde did, with this making his version of Sin Cara a bit of a wash too. Still, even if that were the case, the whole situation did give us the run of Sin Cara versus Sin Cara, as the two men feuded over the rights to bear that name. And once the original returned south of the border in 2014 to resume his career in CMLL, the second version would hang around in WWE as a somewhat successful tag team act alongside someone we'll get to in a moment. So the whole Sin Cara experiment wasn't a complete blowout, and it still ranks as one of WWE's best forays into lucha wrestling, if for no other reason than because, even when it isn't clicking fully, it is still such a spectacular style to watch. Will we ever see both Luis Alverde and Jose Gonzalez in WWE at the same time again in the future, once more battling it out over the mask? We'll have to wait and see, but as it stands today, Místico seems happy wrestling in Mexico, and as for Jose Gonzalez, well, he's also back south of the border now too. Obviously then, this has left a space for other lucha stars to rise up and take their place, something many have tried to do to differing degrees of success. And if you need an example of someone doing this in recent years, you only have to look to our next subject, Dragon Lee. That's right, one of the modern stars of lucha wrestling in WWE, Dragon Lee has already proven himself to be an exciting performer every time he sets foot in the ring inside the WWE. But then, like with his Latino World Order stablemate Rey Mysterio, he was proving this long before he ever reached the WWE.
I don't know much about
Seriously,
him, so
whether it was CMLL, Ring of Honor, or New Japan, during the 2010s, the Jalisco native was tearing it up everywhere he went, so much so that he'd become an ROH World Television Champion on 2 separate occasions, and a CMLL World Lightweight Champion on 2 separate occasions as well. Then, of course, there was the early 2020s, the period which saw him briefly work for promotions like AAA and AEW alongside his brothers Rush and Jalistico. It was while there that he finally caught the eye of management at WWE. And that would lead to them offering to sign him up to a contract in 2022, something he readily accepted as he from there moved over to NXT and went on a run as North American Champion. How have things fared for Dragon Lee since his main roster call-up in early 2024? Pretty good, as he's a member of the LWO and has had an opportunity to sit under the learning tree of Rey Mysterio every week, all while taking part in tag team bouts alongside him. And it's not like he's held no gold at all on the main roster, because he would become the Speed Champion on November 20th of that year after defeating Andrade for the honor, with this being a title he still holds as of the time of this video's recording. Really then it's just a case of waiting to see where the future will take the Mexican from here. Will he get a chance to rise up a level higher, perhaps by going on a full-blown singles run at some point? And if that happens, will he rise to the occasion? After all, the main event scene in WWE is pretty stacked in 2025, so he's going to have to show something special if he wants to stand out there. Or who knows, maybe he'll remain in the spot he's now in as more of a tag team or mid-card act, a utility player who can always be depended on. Sure, it may not be as glamorous of a role, but it is a necessary one. And if he could play this well, it would likely keep him in a job for a long time. Whatever happens, we've no doubt Dragon Lee will continue to be someone worth watching, as whether it's at the top of the card or lower down on it, his in-ring style will always be attention-grabbing, as it's an example of Lucha Libre done well. Hell, we can't discount the idea that he one day takes that mantle of the new Rey Mysterio, as Rey has become his mentor now. But if he wants that mantle, he's no doubt going to have to fend off the challenge of someone else who will be looking to take it, a man who only just recently entered the WWE, Penta. That's right, Penta is a walking ball of charisma who can go in the ring with his lucha stylings. From his early days in AAA, where he became a one-time Latin American champion, to his run in Lucha Underground, where he won their world title twice, all the way to his time spent in AEW, where, alongside his brother Rey Fenix, he became a tag team champion. He's been performing at a high level at every turn. And that meant when he joined WWE in early 2025, then expectations were very high for him to succeed, as his reputation preceded itself. A reputation which had him being called one of the greatest luchadors of the modern era. After all, this is a man who'd already proven he could get over as a star not just in Mexico, but in America too, whether that be in tag team or singles action. So first impressions were going to be important here. And luckily, in his debut match against Chad Gable on the January 13th episode of Raw that year, the Ecatepec native was able to put on a great performance. Where has he gone since then? Well, he's been continuing to show up on Raw and have awesome matches. And in terms of PLEs, he's made his debut there when he entered himself into the 2025 Royal Rumble, coming in at number 2 and lasting for 42 minutes before finally being eliminated by Finn Balor. Will he continue on as a singles star and start chasing belts like the Intercontinental title? Or will his brother Rey Fenix soon join him in WWE as they reform their Lucha Brothers tag team, with this leading them into feuds against the likes of DIY and the Judgment Day? It really is all up in the air at this moment, and we'll have to just wait and see where it goes. One thing is for sure, though, whichever direction things go in, it's going to be exciting to watch, as Penta truly is a top-level luchador, someone who could even go all the way to the top of the card should the stars align in the right way. But let's move away from him for a moment and instead over to that other lucha star of WWE we alluded to earlier, the former tag team partner of Sin Cara. Surely he deserves a spot in today's video too, right? Well, yes he does, and that's exactly why he's our next subject, Kalisto. That's right, this is a superstar who's long been a high-level in-ring performer, with him proving that early on in his career in places like AAA down in Mexico. Of course, once he joined WWE in 2013, though, he suddenly found himself being exposed to a much bigger audience, and that only increased his stock and motivated him to keep going at a high level as he first rose up the ranks of NXT. Would this eventually translate into success for him? Yes, it would, as after going on a tag team run with Sin Cara as the Lucha Dragons, he'd find himself becoming a tag team champion. And after that title reign was over, there would even be singles gold in the Chicago native's immediate future, as it would be in January of 2016 that he won the United States title on not just one, but two separate occasions after beating Alberto Del Rio for the honor each time. Sure, these would ultimately prove to be short range, but it was still a...
Hold on. My shit went down. Oh, shit. 20%? You think I can make that? Oh, fuck. Y'all about to see me do the dumbest shit ever. Babe! Babe! Can you pass my computer charge, laptop charger? Please? Don't laugh at me. I don't want to get up. Please. Thank you. Alright, let's keep going, y'all.
Still a vote of confidence in Kalisto.
Is still fucked up. Alright, there we go.
Kalisto's favor that he was able to get this far at all. And the success would continue from there, as come 2017, he'd also be able to call himself a cruiserweight champion in WWE.
Twice, right?
That's right. No? It's quietly been quite a career that the Lucha Star has had in WWE. And while it may have come to an end in 2021 after he found himself part of a wave of mass releases, he has been able to continue working in places like MLW and DDT, all while even doing a one-shot for All Elite Wrestling at one point. So it's not as if he's anywhere near done yet. No, there's still plenty of time for him to return to the WWE one day and pick right back up where he left off. Even if this doesn't happen, though, Kalisto's time in WWE was still good enough to see him be remembered as one of the most successful luchadors they ever had, and one who helped make the era of 205 Live great. But he wasn't the only 205 Live star who made that show worth watching.
Oh, I think I know what we're talking about.
There was also our next subject, another former partner of Kalisto, who goes by the name of Lince Dorado.
I thought we were talking about
Now, when it comes to Lince Dorado, well, he may not have the resume of...
Because you gotta plug the other one and put the other one in the bottom and then put that one where that's at.
Some other lucha stars in WWE, this shouldn't suggest that he isn't just as good as they are. No, he's a fantastic wrestler, and this has been something which has been clearly on display during his runs in places like Chikara, New Japan, and TNA. Of course, it'll be his spell in WWE most will be familiar with. And that run went all the way from 2016 up until 2021. What did he do during this time? Well, after making a splash in the then newly revived Cruiserweight division during the Cruiserweight Classic by having great matches against the likes of Mustafa Ali and Rich Swann, the New Jersey native would start to become something of a fixture on both Raw and 205 Live. Sadly, though, while his goal here would always be to win the Cruiserweight title, he'd never be able to do so no matter how hard he tried. No, that would be a prize which always evaded him. Still, though, it wouldn't mean his career in WWE would be dead once this became apparent, as at that point, he'd simply move over to tag action when he became part of a trio known as Lucha House Party, alongside Kalisto and another person we'll be talking about soon. How would this run in Lucha House Party go? Pretty good. No, it wasn't a blowaway hit or anything, but they did about as well as could be hoped. After all, they did get to have some solid matches against the likes of the Revival and the Ascension, and while this was happening, Lince Dorado was still finding time to take part in the occasional bit of singles action when he at one point briefly became the 24/7 champion. Of course, as of 2021, winning either singles or tag team gold in WWE has no longer been an option for Dorado, as he's parted ways with the company and has gone on to work in countries like Japan, or at least that was the case until January of 2025, because it was then that, during a live event, he'd appear in a WWE ring once more. Does this mean we can expect to see him on Raw again in the near future? That remains to be seen. One thing we can be sure of, though, is that if he does return to WWE full-time, the third member of the Lucha House Party we alluded to a moment ago won't be joining him, as they're currently under contract with AEW. Who are we talking about here? Why, Grand Metalik, of course. Now, Grand Metalik is someone who has to be considered one of the more undervalued wrestlers out there today, as for years now, he's been showing himself to be an exceptional talent in the ring.
That match with Ray.
Come on now, this is a guy who won just about everything there was to win in CMLL between 2005 and 2016 when he became a multiple-time champion. Needless to say, then, like so many others we've discussed today, when it came time for him to sign on the dotted line with WWE in 2016, expectations were high for him to be a success. It was only a question of whether he would be able to adapt to the WWE style and meet these expectations. Would this happen? Well, yes, to a degree, as well Grand Metalik would never find the same level of success in WWE as he did down in Mexico. He would have a good run in WWE, primarily as part of their mid to late 2010s Cruiserweight division. Yes, it was here that we got to see the Mexican wrestle fun matches against opponents such as Cedric Alexander, Rich Swann, and Brian Kendrick. That said, this would not be the most notable thing he did while in WWE. No, that would come in 2018 when, alongside Kalisto and Lince Dorado, he formed the Lucha House Party, a trio of lucha stars who did everything they could to bring the best in lucha action for fans at the turn of the decade. How would this go for Grand Metalik? Well, while it would work out somewhat for a while and would eventually lead to him also getting a brief run with the 24/7 title, in the end, it wouldn't be enough to see him stay in a job past 2021. No, at that point, he'd also be cut from his contract, and this meant he'd have to look for work elsewhere, with him eventually finding that in AEW. So it seems like even if he's no longer in WWE, Grand Metalik is happy with his career then. But there wasn't always the luxury of another company to go to if you were a luchador working in America who was cut by WWE. No, back in the 2000s, this simply wasn't an option, and that made for difficult times at points for people like our next subject, S.A. Rios. Now, S.A. Rios
hate when people do that. I don't know if y'all can hear, but
that might not be a name everyone remembers today, because back during his run with the WWF between 1997 and 2001, he was never exactly a main eventer. No, despite this being the Attitude Era and almost everyone becoming a star to some degree, he found himself being overshadowed by behemoths like Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, Mick Foley, and The Undertaker. That said, this shouldn't suggest he didn't serve a purpose on the card, and that purpose was to try and keep the company's light heavyweight divisions afloat. Of course, this was a tall order for anyone to do back then, however, as the light heavyweight division was never exactly given much focus. But that only makes the efforts for people like S.A. Rios all the more impressive, as they took something that meant so little and made it great to watch. How did he do this? Well, by having great matches against the likes of Taka Michinoku. But for as much fun as these bouts were, and for as much as his run with the light heavyweight title was deserved, that's not the thing most people would associate S.A. Rios' time in WWF with today. No, today they'd probably associate him most with being the man who first introduced fans to Lita. That's right, it was as his valet that the future women's world champion first made a splash, and we mean that when we say it because her calling card back then was to mimic her clients' moves after he did them, doing even more damage to his opponents as a result. Unfortunately, though, by the time the new millennium was getting into full swing, it was clear that S.A. Rios' time in WWF was coming to an end, and that's why he'd move on to pastures new at this point, spending the rest of his career back down in Mexico working for both AAA and CMLL. Obviously then, this is a shame, because had he hung around for the Ruthless Aggression era, he'd have gotten a chance to mix it up with a whole host of new cruiserweight stars who'd come in from WCW after that company went under. Hell, he could have had great matches with all three of our next subjects, a trio of luchadors who fall into one entry because they all went by the collective name of the Mexicool.
I remember Super Crazy.
Oh, he's back. That's the fourth.
Yes, while many were not fans of this team's gimmick, the superstars themselves were always great performers. And this was namely Super Crazy, Psychosis, and Juventud Guerrera. But then this should be expected from three luchadors.
Super crazy.
Psychosis and themselves were always great performers. And this was namely Super Crazy, Psychosis, and Juventud Guerrera. But then this should be expected from three luchadors as good as they were. After all, back when they were working in WCW prior to this, the Mexicools have been three of the best acts in that company's incredibly stacked cruiserweight division. And even before this, they'd been showing how great they could be during their brief run in ECW working for Paul Heyman. So when both those companies died in 2001 and WWF became the only big name in town for anyone looking to make a living in the United States as a wrestler, then they took their talents over there. And it was over there that they'd continue to have great matches more often than not on the SmackDown mid-card as they helped to establish the Cruiserweight title in its new home of WWE. Would they do anything outside of this? Of course. In fact, after the trio decided to go their own separate ways in 2006 following a year-long run as the premier lucha trio in WWE, Super Crazy would hang around for a couple of years as a single star, moving from brand to brand as a utility player. As for the other two, Psychosis and Juventud Guerrera, well, they'd move on to other things, with both returning to Mexico here to restart their careers in AAA and CMLL. But that shouldn't suggest neither ever had singles success in the WWE, because before he left, Juvi would win the Cruiserweight title on two separate occasions, each time from fellow ECW alum Nunzio. And it's not like leaving WWE would mean the trio would never team up again, because as recently as 2019, they were still working on the independent circuit together. That said, for the most part, each man has gone their own separate way in the years since, with Psychosis now being all but retired, Juventud Guerrero being something of a freelancer, and Super Crazy currently being employed by Pro Wrestling Noah. Of course, considering WWE currently has a working relationship with Noah, this opens the door to a possible WWE return for Super Crazy one day. But what about our next subject? Another star of SmackDown during that same era, the one, the only, Ultimo Dragon. Yes, back in the 90s, Ultimo Dragon was the best out there, a phenomenon of a high-flying talent who made a quick splash in WCW when he joined their roster in 1996. Hell, some of the matches he had back then against names like Rey Mysterio and Dean Malenko still hold up to this day. As we all remember though, by the time 2001 came around, WCW would be over. And this meant the Lucha stars who had worked there no longer had a home base in the United States anymore, unless they could get signed by WWE. Luckily for Ultimo Dragon though, he was good enough that he would eventually get signed by the WWE, with him heading there in 2003. And here he'd get a chance to mix it up again in the great cruiserweight division of the time and perform against an old friend in Rey Mysterio. Hell, he even got to wrestle in Madison Square Garden at WrestleMania 20, allowing him to check off a huge bucket list moment for any wrestler. What would he do after his time in WWE came to an end in 2004? Well, he'd spend his time split between Mexico and Japan. As to whether this could lead him to having that WWE return at some point before all is said and done, well, while it might seem unlikely, we're not going to rule it out completely, as stranger things have happened, especially in wrestling over the last few years. So who knows? Maybe it'll happen, and maybe there'll be even more great lucha stars who join WWE to come.
Shit, man. No ads. Rey Mysterio's the greatest to ever do it. So, oh shit, I haven't preached. I gotta watch this. But yeah, with that being said, man, like, comment, subscribe, turn on notifications, man. I gotta go with my boy Ray, and I got Penta up there. So yeah, that's it. Peace. Again, follow me on my socials, and catch you on the next one. Peace.